Yeah, you know, the stream doesn't start unless you click the button, it turns out. Oh. Yeah, 5 p.m. for you, 8 a.m. 8 a.m. here for me. So starting the stream is indeed a good idea. Hey Xavier, hey Cram, how's it going? Let's see, is this gonna perfect. Perfect. So I was working on something this week that I don't quite have working. So I don't know that I'm gonna continue it um, on stream because I actually don't know. I actually don't know if I'm going to be able to debug it, and I don't want to spend all of the next few hours chasing this down. But I had an idea to basically do selective color based on like the boxes that you can pick up in the game and whatnot. So I wrote the shader and whatnot for a very like straightforward implementation that just kind of, you know, um, doesn't even desaturate or anything, just does the color white with the lighting impact. So like if there are shadows or whatever, those still apply. If there is like ambient occlusion or whatever, you still see all of that kind of stuff. As you can see down here, the apply lighting is still enabled in the shader. And otherwise, you do this like SDF here, basically. And theoretically, this should be following the box, actually. I'm using storage buffers for this, and I actually don't know why the storage buffer isn't updating. That's the bug. But the idea would be that this like is follows anything with the like color reveal component. And then we can, as like a basic, well, first implementation is just unveil all color. Second implementation might be like have different boxes that unveil different colors. So like RGB boxes. Thought that could be built into an interesting puzzle mechanic. But that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing the shader is sort of on in the location that the box actually starts in the scene in. But for some reason, the storage buffer isn't updating. And what I mean by that is like the storage buffer updates, but for some reason it doesn't make it into the shader. And I don't actually know the answer as to why. But the storage buffer stuff is very cool. So here we have storage buffer binding 100. This is a material extension, so a standard material extension. And that gives us this array of vec for F32. And then my understanding is that array length is actually bugged for some of the buffers. So that's a little bit of a thing that I'm nervous about in this implementation, but I think it works for storage buffers specifically. And then this is just like, it's not smooth min or anything right now. It's just regular min for an SDF. So this will all be configurable and stuff at some point. Let me make chat a little bit bigger. So some color mechanics like Portal 2 or Splatoon. I'm actually unfamiliar with the color mechanics in Portal 2. Splatoon, I am aware. I don't think it'll be similar to Splatoon in the sense that like I'm probably not going to do paint. But yeah, in some sense, where you can color the stage or whatever. Oh boy, my Bevy shader knowledge has improved, but I still don't know how to generate geometry in a shader. before passing new geometry to a material shader without GPU readback. You mean like generate geometry in a vertex shader? I think there's an example of that. I don't know if it's an example in the Bevy repo. Exactly. And I think about it. But that is definitely possible. That's the approach that they use for doing the triangle demo in WGPU, but they have lower level APIs in play. Oh man, lower level APIs in play there. So they're just passing like a series of indices, and then the vertices are defined in the shader. Actually, don't know if Bevy has a corresponding example. I don't think so. I do have a readback example though, which is cool. Make this a little bigger. Maybe you can see it on stream. Yeah, and then what's the other thing here? So I'm basically debugging a bunch of stuff in this example. This example is just sitting in an examples directory right now. I split everything out into plugins this week off stream. So we've got like a controller plugin and et cetera, which is nicer. Where's our material? This is our material. It's interesting that the box does inherit the color. It's kind of like a cylindrical decal. So the material is applied to everything in this example. The box has the material. The plane has the material. Like literally everything has the material. And then I have one storage buffer that is then bound to all of those materials. The other thing that concerns me is that it keeps recreating this buffer. So what is the coordinate system the material uses? This is a world space position. If that's what you're asking. Like the location here. I actually have this in the examples. Yeah, let me turn off the updating. So the issue is that the initial data gets set, the first frame data gets set, and then the second frame data does not, second frame on. So let's see, if I had 2, -2, I don't know, 1, 1, let's not make this too big. And then I ran this. This is literally sending this data in through a storage buffer. So that's world space positioning, right? We've got 2 of them here. I thought there was supposed to be 3. Oh, I moved it up on the y-axis, that's why. So these are global positions, like global transforms. And that's intentional. It's not supposed to be object space to the box because when I'm doing the buffer updates here, I'm actually passing in all the transforms. So I'm packing all of those transforms into a storage buffer, sending that storage buffer to the shader. And then the shader for all the materials is being like, am I close enough when I draw this pixel? So the shader is actually just a fragment shader, but it has access to effectively the SDF positions for everything. There's no configuration on the SDFs right now, so it's just like whatever I make it. Where are my assets? There we go. So yeah, this storage buffer here that I call SDFs is just a array of vec4s that I'm iterating over. These are world positions, so I take the world position of the thing that I am rendering minus the position of the SDF -1. And the issue is that this value doesn't update. The SDF XYZ value doesn't update. So that means the storage buffer isn't updating. Can we generate geometry in the vertex shader? I thought this was done in the geometry shader or a compute shader. There is no geometry shaders in like WGPU, WGSL, that kind of stuff. So then Bevy also does not have geometry shaders. You can definitely do generation of geometry in a compute shader, but you can do any kind of computation in a compute shader. Maybe I misunderstood what you were trying to do with the geometry earlier. You can definitely like decide to just render a random set of indices and then define the vertex data in a vertex shader. Oh yeah, it's fine. If y'all are interested, we can dig in for sure. I just don't think I'm gonna debug it because I tried to debug it yesterday for a while. And it's basically like, hey, let's dig into the Bevy source code, which I'm not sure is like the best thing to do on stream. I think I'll just turn it into a video when I figure it out anyway. Where ought the SDF be updated? Where should the SDF be updated? Let's go for, so there's two things here, right? One is we've got this file, and this file has a material plugin for an extended material, so a material extension. And I'm kind of calling this like Uber material. It's like it's just gonna have a bunch of stuff in it. It's gonna be one big shader because I'm just gonna apply it to everything. I think because it's low poly, this is an acceptable approach. It's a little bit more expensive than trying to do this kind of effect as like a post process or something like that. But I think it gives more flexibility. And if the color reveal thing is going to be a strong feature of the game, then doing it this way makes sense. And paying the extra cost makes sense. I think if it was a secondary thing, maybe it wouldn't. But so we have this material. The material is set up with as bind group. So we end up with a storage buffer at binding position 100 that has a storage buffer. That's what this means. And then we've got our fragment shader here. To fill that buffer, the first thing that needs to happen is these things have to have the material on them. So in this case, standard material extension base. Base is a standard material. Extension is the Uber material. So we create this storage buffer. In this case, we're creating it from this vec. That gets the handle cloned. I'm inserting that into a resource too for no real reason at this point. I was just trying to do some debugging stuff. But that storage buffer handle gets passed to the material. The material gets cloned onto all of these objects and stuff. And then some of these objects have this extra component on it called color reveal, which is just an enum component, reflected data, not super important. But we query for the color reveal and a global transform in this pack color reveal buffer system. Generate the packed vec of vec4s, and then take that and throw it into this buffer that we have from the material as a slice. So we just kind of like fill this buffer. The other thing that I'm doing that's interesting here is to cut down on the number of times I like access the same buffer. I'm actually taking the handles from those materials and uniquing them so that we're only filling like a unique buffer or a given buffer one time instead of like once for every object in the scene. You think my audio is too high? My bass voice makes the audio a bit overmodulated. I'm not sure what overmodulated means in this context, but I can definitely look at the audio in a second. I'm clipping a tad. Oh, you know what I did do actually the other day when I was doing recording? Let me. Oh no, that's actually not. I'm clipping a tad. Have I always been clipping on all streams? I don't think I've changed anything in that sense. For recent streams and whatnot. It's gonna be hard for me to tell where I'm clipping in my chain. It's probably gonna be here if it's anywhere at all. Did that get any better? The only place that I can think of it that it would be clipping is actually in OBS. Talk a bit. Trying to talk a little bit. You think it's better? I think that probably, okay, I turned it down a little bit more. As long as my volume's still high enough. The only place that I can think of it clipping is OBS because my actual audio chain is all 32-bit, so there is no clipping up until the point at which it hits OBS and then goes. I don't want to open up any audio software in case it like completely borks for some reason, but as long as that's like still of a volume, it's still clipping when I'm getting loud. Interesting. I'll have to take a look at it later. I assume it's like not so bad that you can't hear me or anything, or that it's like super annoying or something. If it's super annoying, I'll look into it. If it's not, then I'm probably going to leave it for later. You want a shader to receive a mesh, faces and vertices, and generate more faces and vertices based on what it received. For example, receiving a plane and outputting a cube. Yeah, if you're going to actually generate the vertices, I think you would have to do that in a compute shader. You could, if you knew how many you were going to create the additional indices and just move them around in a vertex shader. But I think you have to do the compute shader if you want to do actual mesh generation. You're right. You've been experimenting for days reading Bevy's plugin code. Interesting. Anybody knows a plugin that does something similar? No sound issue for you, Xavier? Interesting. Yeah, as long as I'm of volume at the moment, then I'm just going to leave it. But yeah, the only places in my audio chain where that would be happening is OBS, and I just turned it down about 5 decibels, so I don't know that I want to turn it down any more than it's currently turned down without checking stuff, but yeah. Generating geometry on CPU and moving into the vertex shader you managed? Yeah, cool. That's definitely where I'd start. I don't know if you have an intention for like why you want to do it in a shader. I assume you just want to do it faster, etc. But I don't know of anything that does compute shader mesh generation, and all of the mesh generation libraries that I can think of off the top of my head are all CPU side. So it sounds less good than my AOC videos. That's entirely possible. It's a slightly different OBS chain. So I record my OBS videos on my Mac, and then I can do post-processing, and I can listen to it when I'm recording. But for the stream, it goes through my Windows PC, and I have a little bit less like dynamic control over it. But I can look at it later. I will. I actually will look at it later. Not that I can look at it later. It's interesting for me, and I want to make it not clip. Oh yeah. Okay. So which exact assignment is supposed to get the current coordinates of the cube? Right. That's where we are here. So we've got the pack color reveal buffer system, which runs an update, so it runs once a frame. We query for the SDF locations, which is any entity with the color reveal component and a global transform. and then we pack those in using the translation into an array of 4 elements for F32. That gets thrown in here. I can probably just print this. I think I have some other printing going on here too. I did a lot of debugging. So I think that's this. So you can see that there is data here that is different. Also, the other thing is, did I bring up Xcode? I think I closed Xcode maybe. There we go. Let's run this, because this is the example. So we run this like this, right? And then we go into Xcode and we click the right menu and capture GPU workload. So at this point, it's basically stopped like there, right? So let's make this bigger. Let's scroll down to like the main opaque path 3D. I don't know. It doesn't really matter where we are in here. But let's do like draw index primitives or something. I happen to know it's buffer 5. Just out of out of having debugged this already. So the float for SDFs here is actually -2.50. And that is, if we look at the actual data, really not an appropriate value. That's the default value. That's the place of the where the cube starts. So I don't know. I like the buffer is getting filled. I checked as best I could in the render world that the buffers were getting created. They are the right length. I don't know, because the buffers in the render world aren't mapped, I can't actually check the data in the render world. But you can obviously see that when I throw it into Xcode and we do GPU debug, like this data, this is not the initial data, right? It's not the startup data. It's the first frame update data. So why does it not continue to update? So I guess I'll stop this because we don't need that anymore. There is this commit, bind only the written parts of storage buffers, and there's an issue associated with this 15.920. So there's some array length issues and stuff, but notably the storage buffer is actually, unless the Xcode debug is like wrong for some reason, which I don't think it is, then yeah. So there's an issue here where like if you have a buffer and it decreases in size, so like 2n and then n size, you can actually get an array length reported of 2n for the next frame instead of n, which could give you out of bounds indices and stuff. So, yeah. I'm not sure what the actual issue is there. So somehow the cube's starting position persists and the transformation on the cube is separate, maybe? The transformation on the cube is separate, maybe. Transformation on the cube is separate, maybe. You think the transformation or the translation isn't changing? Like this transform? I think we definitely are changing that because this value is changing here. So like that's the new SDF's value. So new SDFs is changing, you know? In this case, I'm actually like even changing the size. So what we should actually see is like a flashing SDF showing up and going away. Yeah, but the data that's sent isn't that somehow instead it gets the original data. Um, yeah, I don't. The only thing that I could possibly think of is that there's some kind of caching going on, and that it is, I don't know, caching the original frame update buffer for some reason. That's why I'm changing the size of it currently. But yeah, whatever I put in here will actually get written for the first frame. I also don't know where that cache is. There is this PR which points to like the storage buffer stuff. And I've thrown debugs in the storage buffer files too. Let's see. So there's like binding here, right? And I've thrown debugs and binding and stuff like that, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I don't know the answer. There is write buffer here, which could potentially be the thing. Like it keeps a scratch value around. Actually, let's read through this for a second. Write buffer, device queue. Scratch is a field on the buffer. So if we look at the buffer value, it's like value scratch, buffer, label, changed, usage, last written size, right? So it's a little weird to have scratch and buffer and value, I guess. I guess value is the shader type, so. So the scratch gets written to with the value. The buffer capacity gets created. The buffer size gets created. If the capacity is less than the size, then I think that we have shrank. Or if it's changed, then it also creates the buffer. Otherwise, it tries to reuse the same buffer. And sets the last written size. So I don't see anything wrong with this, you know? We theoretically could throw a debug in there, but I don't know that we would debug anything useful. Right, because it's not like changing the scratch data or anything. I guess value could be sticking. Something like that. Can you temporarily rig it so it always refreshes the buffer no matter what, just to see if it resolves it? It does refresh the buffer. What do you mean by refresh the buffer? Oh, you mean like recreate the entire buffer? Yeah, I think I could do that. Obviously, that wouldn't be a solution for the long term, but let's just grab the code that we have to already create this buffer and just slap it in there. Right, this is the thing, and we need the query for buffers, which I think we already have. So let's just do this. This will obviously create a buffer every let's do it below, let's say to do remove creating buffer every frame is like bad probably. So we have the SDFs theoretically. This obviously is not set, so we would need to take new SDFs. and create that storage buffer. And then we would need to, right now we're only updating the materials. So maybe I don't put this in here. Maybe I do a whole new loop. I'm going to sneeze and I'm not going to be able. You ever get that feeling where you're just like, yep, that the sneeze is coming and there's nothing I can do about it? Okay, so we do this. Grab this. This is going to be new buffer, new SDFs. Probably have to clone that now that we're doing this. It already seems to create a new buffer all the time, judging by the growing buffer ID. Yes, but I also think that that's intentional on that side of things. This is creating a new buffer in the main world, which is associated with whatever infrastructure is responsible for then taking that, copying it over to the render world, and then sending it over to the GPU. Whereas what they're doing on the GPU to create this buffer is just like effectively take the data and send it to the GPU. At least that's my understanding of what's going on here. So I probably don't want to do this long term, but I obviously have not benchmarked it or anything either. What happens if you specifically read out the buffer with ID 1 after the first frame? Oh, you think? Yeah, so the issue with that is the buffer IDs that are getting created here are, yes, they're new buffers, but also the issue is that they're in the render world and none of them are mapped. And I don't think, without modifying the Bevy source code for that buffer creation, I don't think we can easily map that data for consumption on the CPU side, because those buffers are getting created to get sent to the GPU. So there has to be some bookkeeping from WGPU to tell us when we are actually allowed to access it on the CPU, which means it has to be mapped when it's created in the simplest case. And we just don't have that to do. Where's my... Get a little bit of a AC going on here, getting a little hot. Okay, so we're gonna need to like clone this, I think. We have the SDFs now. This is a handle, so this will be an iter mute, and I'll have to do this for every material too. So it's not gonna be not gonna be pretty. So this is not buffer handle. This is asset ID mat, right? And then mat dot. Did I call this SDFs? That mat dot extension dot SDFs equals SDFs. So theoretically, this is setting it to a new storage buffer every frame, rather than reusing the old one. Which again, especially as the scene gets bigger, is not what I want to do, because this is like, yeah, there we go. So it's some kind of caching issue. I don't know. There's no functions, as far as I know, on storage buffers to like force it to update. We're debugging some storage buffers currently. And basically what we just confirmed is that the storage buffer is somehow being cached. Because if it's not cached and we recreate it every frame, then it works. So we can get rid of this. I think I can get rid of this too. I'm not using this anywhere. Yep. Get rid of this. Not using that. I think the insert thing that I'm doing here is weird. Don't need that anywhere. This is just a debug anyway. Let's start with making sure that this works. If I don't do that, and it's still in our thing up here. So yeah, so you can see how it's actually, let's widen it a little bit too. So the size of the SDF right now is configurable. So like if I make it a 3, it's pretty big. And you can see that as it gets to the circle, which hilariously is the opposite of what I intended to do originally. I intended to have the circle go around and color the cube. And now through debugging, I've eventually ended up at the cube having the SDF on it. But yeah, this kind of thing. And then we take this material over to the actual game. We throw it on everything. Everything has the material, and then we can configure certain things to enable or disable color. So let me get rid of this other thing that I was doing. Debug insert, get rid of that. This is debug render. These are all of the, so this is, actually now that I'm looking at this, I can just say it. This is the render app in render, debug render. This is all of the buffers on the render side. So we can get rid of that too. Debugging cache issues is always fun, but knowing that's where the issue lies will be helpful at least. Yeah, I had the suspicion, right? Especially since there have been cache issues in that location in the past. Let's get rid of insert here. Let's do, I guess, blue here. And we'll just kind of live with this for the moment. Again, I don't really want to like dig into the cache issue on stream. Debugging the actual implementation is fine, but I don't want to dive too deep into the Bevy internals. Cool. So then let's do, I guess let's match the color reveal here too. And this is going to be hue and color. And we'll, I guess, match color. What did I do there? Mute query. Oh, I put that in way the wrong spot. What is that? So T and color. And then we match color. I'm just really all over the place right now. Shared reference, color, fill match arms. Red will do the thing that we're doing right there, which is just cosine sine, so it moves in a circle. And then the other one that I had was what, blue? And blue can do the opposite, I guess. And green will just be like, hey, you didn't do this. So now we've got these two of them moving. Both have their own settings. Where is my shader? My shader's here. Make them a little bit smaller. I don't know how big I'm going to make them in the actual game. But in this little demo, it's nicer to have them smaller. So we'll have to configure that in some way. I also don't know if I want them to be smooth or hard edges. We will want to do an S-min, like a smooth min, because as these two get closer, you can see like a line between them. Yeah, hard min on the SDF, yeah. Yeah, absolutely S-min is a good idea. Distance to nearest, color. Where am I going to do the configuration for each of these? I think this. That brings up. I don't really want to keep nesting these ifs, but again, we're not really being terribly performant right now. One in this case is red. Not I dot W. Oh, are we not in that loop anymore? No, we're not. I need to store that. That's fine. We don't need to do that right now. Cool. So I guess we take this and throw it into the main scene now. One thing that I think I want to do before we do that is get rid of the overrides. So I patched all of the Bevy stuff, and I don't want to do that. Cool. Still running without. So cargo run for our regular game should bring up the main scene. Cool. It's a little bit janky is maybe the right word. There's some issues around the smoothing and when I'm doing it with the physics and stuff like that. But again, I think I'm going to figure that out later. Yeah, all the throws are working, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all good. Yeah, definitely up the friction on the ground. Absolutely. Especially for these boxes that are like not supposed to slide like icicles that are just kind of like sliding. Did all this in dev. I think I'm just going to comment this out for the moment. And then I actually don't want the IS stuff, the perf stuff in right now. So I'm just going to comment that out for the moment. And then when we spawn this scene, I want to apply this material to everything. So I guess we can do that in main. This is our observer for main for the level spawning. I feel like this is going to be an iter all children of the scene vibe. Fine tuning the various parameters, friction, elasticity, restitution, angular, etc., can probably change the game feel a lot. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I need to fix the camera jank, I think, before I think about fine tuning any of the mechanic itself. Because if we, and this is not a dev versus release thing that I can think of, so I think we're good to run this in dev to show the issue. I switched the controls to being leaf wing. And when I did that, the mouse input became a little bit more janky. So you see how it's like chunking up and down there rather than being smooth. I don't know if that comes across on stream. It's kind of like a little bit hard to see even at full, but you can see it being like very like steppage y. So, and then this too. This keeps coming back. This like the player is moving and then whatever's. This also keeps happening too. I don't know if it's a Bevy to Nua issue or not, but every time we do like a jump and then a land, or not every time, but like a bunch of times we do a jump and a land, it like goes too far into the ground. So I don't know exactly what to do about that yet, but the jump is really weird. You mean this jump? Oh, the camera plus the jump. Yeah. I don't know what I'm going to do with the camera for jumping yet. I don't know. Like right now it moves in the Y direction, but it shouldn't necessarily do that either. Where's our camera controls? Did I not move this over yet? Oh, am I not doing that anymore? I thought we were smooth nudging this. No, I think I took that out because I assumed that the... Yeah, okay. So now there's transformation interpolation built into Avian. So if you modify transforms in fixed update, it smooths them automatically. But that does also make it feel slow. Hang on, I gotta check something real quick. All right, we're back. Mild amount of smooth nudging will help Scott fine tune how aggressive the smoothing is. Yeah, the camera needs a bunch of work, and stuff like that. The interaction of when the input comes in from Leafwing, Avian doing transform interpolation, fixed updates, and Tenua having control over things makes it hard to figure out where exactly these systems should be. The Yellow Ferris demo. What is the Yellow Ferris demo? What's the name of the Yellow Ferris demo? Oh, the BRP. Okay, way over my head. Didn't even didn't land for me. Cool. So yeah, there needs to be a bunch of work done on camera stuff. I need to figure out exactly where to place things. I think things changed slightly when I updated to stable too. So yeah, anyway, I think the landing and going backwards is a Tenua issue. I don't know offhand where we should be putting that collider. Right, because if we do player and player has here's the sensor shape and the float is somewhere, maybe in controls. Now that I've moved everything. The float height right now is 0.9. Must be greater than the distance between the center and the lowest point of the collider. The collider being I think this sensor. Not the sensor, actually. The capsule. So capsule is 0.5, but it's actually bigger than that because it's a capsule, and that's the definition of the height of the body and the radius of the body. So the capsule caps are not included in that. So like, yeah. Not exactly sure. It's center to the lowest point. So if 0.5 is the size of the height of half of the capsule inner without the caps, then this size has to be something like 0.75 or something like that. So 0.9 should be fine, but it keeps like landing in the plane. Nope, that's not what I want to do. So I have a little bit of like digging to do in Tenua as well, I think, in addition to the camera stuff. Because I can mostly get rid of it if I set that float high enough. Obviously not the camera jitter, but the Tenua landing issue. So in camera, we've got the rig, right? We don't have the position. The camera control. So handle mouse was really smooth, if I remember correctly. And this was the accumulated mouse motion every frame, run through the update. And now we have that somewhere else. Handle pan tilt, I think, is that now. So now it's action state from leaf wing with the camera rig, grabs the axis pair for the pan tilt, which does make it so that, oh, let's see, actually, I don't know if this is connected. Wireless controller. Let's see if it just connects. Perfect. We saw gamepad connected here, which is great. So this is controller as well. The controller controls, I think, need to be a little bit different than the mouse controls. The sensitivities seem very, very, very different. Still going lower than the floating height and slowly damping back up. Your guess is due to the physics parameters or the collision response. You don't know about position-based simulations, but yeah. I think, I don't know. I'm not going to say anything because I don't know offhand. But this like jitter here needs to get fixed. Like that is really bad. Just holding left effectively. And then for some reason it backs up all the time when I put the controller down. More classic physics systems having a small intersection is usual. Yeah, I mean, that's how all collision systems work, right? They actually detect how much of one goes into the other and then do the, like, correction. Hello, Prince. How are you? So we have control camera somewhere in here. So right now, all we're doing is like setting it. You wonder if it would make sense for the camera to run on prefixed. You mean fixed update? Yeah. I went kind of back and forth on that. Oh, prefixed update. I don't know which one that is. Oh, we saw some warning over here. What is that? SDL mapping, PS5 controller, unknown button B14. Okay, cool. I think it's because this must have like motion control or something in it. But that's something I'll need to fix too. So this is camera in fixed update, which actually, honestly, the up and down looks much better. This feels a lot smoother, actually. I'm going to leave it there. And then the following still doesn't feel great. Yes. So the thing in Avian 0.2 is Avian 0.2. They run in fixed post update. Which means that transform interpolation should work in any fixed update. I wonder if I should have done more to be like, hey, fixed update is getting better last cycle. Because it was getting better. And I mentioned it a couple times, but I don't think I was like... I still don't know that people really understand what fixed update is. In the wider world, I mean. There's a whole section here for why fixed update. Did I put the physics and stuff in the right spot in that case? Yeah, physics, fixed post update. And then controller and avian in fixed update. Yeah. User input controls should be the first thing to happen, right? Yeah. You're saying you think that the camera control application should be in first? I think our issue is that we need a little bit of smoothing, and I'm setting it specifically. Okay, then fixed pre for what? Anything that's reading Leafwing? I don't think that... When does Leafwing do their input reading? Source plugin somewhere? Plugin. Leafwing does pre-update for updating the input. Yeah, so first pre-update, state transition. State transition doesn't matter for us. Run fixed main loop, which runs fixed update some number of times. Then update, then post-update. So controller input is basically the first possible thing to happen. I think that putting things in first is not the right solution. First is... I made a fix to Bevy ECS tile map that there's something about the timing, if I remember correctly, and like work that can happen before the frame time. So first pre-update, fixed main, update, post-update. And I assume that Leafwing is doing the right thing because it's Alice's library. Or I guess like Alice is has a big part in maintaining this one, is what I should say. So all of the actual input looks like it's happening pre-update. And then Shenua, Avian 3D. I feel like it wasn't clear in the Shenua docs. So they say, since Avian changed the default schedule from post update to fixed post, user code just uses the de facto default update. We'll start having weird results. This forces the user to make a deliberate decision regarding which schedule to run. But they don't talk at all about which schedule that would be for Tenua and such. Probably the extent of jitter right now can't be fully explained by update order wonkiness. Yeah, I think there's a combination there for sure. Made your first espresso pull, Prince. Nice. So anything, I'm reading this as like anything in update that modifies a transform will have weird results. And that's because it runs after Avian. Fixed main loop is not what I'm looking for. Where's fixed post update? Ah, fixed main. That's what I want. So we got main first, pre-update. Pre-update is when Leafwing does its work. Fixed post-update, which I think will run in the fixed main loop, runs before update. So physics will be done by the time update happens, which is why it would be weird. And then fixed main. Why don't I have the schedule that this is? Right, like fixed post update, schedule that runs after fixed update, fixed update. Where's the list documented for this? Fixed main. Run fixed main loop. System set. I guess you're not supposed to put things into this then, right? Which feels weird. Anyway. This is the setting that I'm not sure is correct. Tenua in fixed update. And then target camera to player probably also. So in order, get the inputs for the camera and player, character controller, physics, maybe transform propagation camera. Maybe transform propagation camera. Yeah, inputs first, character controller, physics, transform propagation as part of physics, I think. Actually, I think we can look that up. Bevy transform interpolation. I think that's the crate. So we get interpolation and extrapolation. And this is fixed first for easing set, fixed last for update end. So right after the fixed main loop is when the transform interpolation happens. So input, controller, physics, interpolation. No, I think fixed update is correct for the controller. I think that's the right place to put it, the right thing to do. The question is target camera to player. Should that be in here as well? I guess anything that modifies transforms that isn't a render only concern should go in fixed update at this point. Yeah. Definitely feels like that's true. The pitch still feels a little bit crunchy with this setup, but we've completely fixed the hopping for the control or for the player or whatever. So happy with that overall. I need to get rid of these little like rock things that I put into the scene. Hey, you were following past live streams and copying code as you did, but some versions were updated and broke the code. Could you use specific versions instead of Avian 3D branch main? Avian 3D branch main is no longer a thing in this. So, actually, I did this off stream. So if you're following along with this for some reason, then you're not going to be happy with me for that. But here's all the versions currently. Everything is locked in. We're on stable for everything. Usually I do use a revision. I don't know why I used main for Avian there. Everything else that I was using that didn't have a commit has a revision. But yeah, at this point, if you're using any of the code and whatnot, just upgrade to stable 0.2. But I'll try to be better about that in the future, about that revision, making sure that it happens for everything. Because I agree, especially like sometimes I do things and I leave them for a while and come back to them later, and I still want them to work. So, Hey Chris, would love your opinion. If your game was not a real-time system, but rather only reacted to user input, would you use Bevy ECS standalone and run the world once for user input, or I guess or is like just letting me fill in the dots? Or did you not finish your question yet? Things that you can do in Bevy to react to user input, but still take advantage of everything that Bevy offers is like, I don't think this particular thing that I want to look for is in, yeah, there we go. So it's on world, but there's a new command that does this too. So all of the things that we were just looking at, like for all of the things like update, fixed update, et cetera, those are all schedules. And schedules are things that you can create as well. So I would start probably with running maybe individual systems or using observers or something like that. And if your code gets complicated enough to benefit from being in its own schedule, you can run entire schedules as well. So, yeah, I think that would be roughly the approach that I would suggest. If you're doing like a turn-based game and you have complicated logic, you can set all your stuff up in a schedule that only runs when the user like selects something, you know, and then run that whole schedule, and then that schedule will complete, and then your game will keep going. There are things that you don't want to run like that, like user input, you know. But for game logic, like click two positions on a board and then run a bunch of logic for, you know, move enemies, or like move you, move enemies, run AI, et cetera, et cetera. You could do that all in your own custom schedule. Xavier says, if you want Bevy to react to user input and user input to react to what Bevy does, that is driver in the loop and is a case of real time. Yes, I see what you're saying. I think in their context, they're not really thinking of real time as like hard real time or anything like that. They're kind of thinking of like, is everything running every frame or is it on demand? So yeah, you can definitely, like, there are APIs where you can just take the world in, and then like the input stuff is very lightweight, right? So you do a bunch of input, maybe leaf wing or something like that, hook it up to a bunch of actions. One of those actions comes in, and then you run the schedule associated with whatever needs to be done. Cool. What was I gonna do this stream? I feel like I went off on a hour and a half tangent. Let's see. So controller doesn't like to, there we go. I don't think I vibe well with the direction that I chose for up and down for pitch. I keep doing, like, anytime I want the character to move forward, I also move the right stick forward, so I end up doing this. So I'm definitely gonna have to like, oh, that's really interesting. You can like flick, because it moves in the direction of the player. If you have momentum and then you like flick right, you can like toss it fairly hard to the right. That's kind of cool. I think I like that. Oh yeah, momentum preservation. So it's very simple. It's just taking whatever the character is doing and adding it to the box before it throws. So it's definitely not like, it's nothing fancy, right? Like if I'm going backwards and I throw, it'll just stop. That also leads to really funny things that I don't necessarily think are good, but you can absolutely yeet the box, which is probably not great. That seems a little high, a little too much energy, but no mass currently. Not intentional mass anyway. Um, Avian might be doing something relating to it, but there's no mass calculation currently that I have input other than what would be Avian defaults. Yeah. I mean, like, that's a pretty intense throw. And I don't know that you could really even target that. Like it's fun in the sense that like that's hella high to throw something. Um ooh, that was actually fine. So if you time it right, you can get a better. I guess also because the jump is configurable, right? So you can kind of like soft launch something if you're doing it correctly. That's kind of cool. I think that's probably more useful than this. But I don't know that you get one without the other, really. Issue is if you're animation bound, you're effectively do infinite force. There's a big talk about how Tears of the Kingdom managed to be so relatively stable with its physics. And it basically comes down to physics come first. All animation is force constrained. Cool. I don't know what the animations are going to look like in this game currently. One of the things that I have to do either this week or the next week or something like that is um, create an actual character because this cylinder isn't going to last us forever. The vehicles would be very cool. I don't think this game has the scope for vehicles. We could do a vehicle game at some point, but I think we would do a dedicated vehicle game and probably not a add-on to the current game. Vehicles aren't complicated in the sense that like you could do them very simply. But I think doing like a good vehicle controller is probably more complicated than something that I want to add to the current game. How are you doing your jump right now? Is that a force or a velocity? I believe it's a force. It's Tenua controlled. So I actually don't get to do much more than like configure it. Right. So Tenua has a built-in jump. It's got a jump height. I assume that they do something behind the scenes to convert this into fall extra gravity. Yes, definitely. That sounds good. And they do like input buffers and some stuff like that. I need to play around with some of the deeper settings here too. Is Bevy an engine or a framework? Yeah, I don't know, man. uh, what do you consider an engine? What do you consider a framework? Is really like what that question comes down to. Bevy is a Rust crate that allows you to write games and comes with a bunch of like the ability to spawn a mesh, the ability to define AABB colliders, the ability to run a bunch of logic on a schedule, import sprites and use them, a whole bunch of other stuff like that. Comes with a whole like render setup, UI, et cetera, et cetera. So like, I don't know that I have the answer for is Bevy an engine or a framework. And mostly because I After decades of programming, I can't tell you what a framework is, honestly. I think that's almost a per person definition. Real life vehicle sim is kind of complicated. Yes, absolutely. I think I wouldn't do real life. Um, uh, but yeah, even like whatever simulated is tough. Yeah, on the engine versus framework thing, like if you have specific questions, ask them, and I can tell you whether Bevy can do that or not. There's no editor; it's all code based at the moment. You can use GLTF exports from Blender. You can do a whole bunch of stuff, etc., etc. There's a good theory article for vehicle physics. Treat lateral and longitudinal separately or something. Yeah, there's a bunch of, I think, good like vehicle controller content out there. Right? Like there's a bunch of like even videos who are like, hey, this is how you do a car controller. Um, I tend to like arcadey car controllers better. I was a big Rocket League player for a long time. So I like cars that can fly in the air with boost more than I like F1 cars. But yeah, I think any of them are vaguely complicated. I know the physics in Rocket League has its whole own. They used bullet physics, and then I think modified it for their use case and stuck that into Unreal 3. So physics was very, very important for them, and they did a bunch of custom work, is my understanding. Because you launched the main loop with app run, it qualifies as an engine. Interesting. Nobody likes F1 Le Mans prototypes for the win. Aston Martin DBR1 best car ever. What is an Aston Martin DBR1? Is that because somebody drove it at some point? I DBG1. My my rust is leaking. DBR1. Oh, this car. I know this car. Or maybe I know cars like it. This is like old Le Mans or whatever, like old racing car, right? Qualifies as an engine because it makes my fans spin up and go burr. One of the really interesting things, actually, there's an RFC for like trait function imports or something like that. So this dot dot default thing is going to be a Rust language built in at some point soon. This comes from Bevy itself currently. But Bevy's going to be able to just fully remove it and rely on the Rust language implementation. XNA. That's the Microsoft thing, right? Cool. Let's try to apply this material. That's one of the things I wanted to do. Let's open Blender. Do I have Blender open? Did Blender crash? Blender's over here. Blender's not even on the right monitor. I guess save that. I never know what I changed when I come back to Blender, and it's like there's a little asterisk there. That's a little too close to whatever that is. Okay, so let's get rid of these rocks because they were just things I was futzing with. And then I guess like I want to be able to throw the crates somewhere at least. So maybe somewhere over here. Obviously, this isn't like a real level or anything yet. Let's shift A. Let's do, I guess, a cylinder. trying to think of how I want to do this. Make the wall a collider? Definitely could. I think I'm going to delete the wall, actually, though. I think the wall over here is mostly a... Dang, I really don't understand how to... how to navigate. Zoom in, out, pan... is one of the reasons I need a numpad keyboard. Literally panning my way around to get to this wall. So this was an example of like how to work with Substance Painter. Obviously, it's not even like entirely accurate because the UVs, something I realized later actually, the UVs for the textures, right? This is horizontal for the brick, and this is vertical. So these all actually, it would be nice if those lined up, right? But this wall in particular, not really important in any sense. We can definitely make it a collider. We're going to be in the same part of the code in a second here. Right. One of the other things that I want to do at some point, probably not today, is this whole like sequence that I have here for inserting colliders on things. I don't like in general. What did we call this? Let's call this like a wall. There we go. We need to export this now. So export GLTF. Just export, doesn't matter. This will then be a wall. And then this is no longer ground entity. Should probably just start calling these entity. What did I do there? This one. There we go. Probably actually, since I have so many in here, I'm going to keep them separately named because otherwise they could potentially shadow each other. And I don't want to deal with debugging that. So a wall entity will insert tri-mesh from mesh, which should just make the scene or make the wall a collider. So should just have collider now. We're doing everything by name currently, but we need to find a better way to do that. So look at that. We can run into the wall now. Terribly hard to, you know, make something a collider. And then we can, I guess, throw stuff at it, hopefully. So, yeah. Very much like trivial to make things colliders. Avian is such a great library. And Rapier too, right? Like, this is just as easy in both of them to make something a collider like this. I think that Avian has this, like, tri-mesh from mesh thing with the collider constructor. The collider constructor is really useful. I don't know if there's a... There wasn't at some point, but I don't know if there's a enum like this in Rapier at the moment. So yeah, we have to do like this right now. We have to grab the entity out of the list of entities and then like insert a collider and the kind of collider on it. And this is the kind of thing that should just be in the GLTF file. And we should run one generic process for getting all of those colliders onto all of our entities and meshes and whatever. We're not going to do that today though, because GLTF extras sounds like a whole thing. And the thing that I actually want to do right now is get that material applied to things. So what do we do here? We do probably a query for children. We're going to need res mute. I guess not res mute, because all of these standard materials are going to get converted. The one thing I didn't do, actually, now that before we get into this too far, I didn't set up the materials plugin. So I started splitting everything out into plugins. Lib just kind of has some asset stuff inside of it right now. That's from earlier when we just had a main file. Then we have camera, controls, dev, and materials. Dev is a bunch of debug stuff. This is kind of where I'm planning on putting anything that I wouldn't have split out into another crate, but I want to like enable, disable based on flags or something like that. We've got controls, which we were looking at earlier. This is where the Chinua stuff is going to live. This is where the Leafwing stuff is going to live. We've got camera, which is where the camera rig stuff lives, but not where the control of the camera lives. So this is our like application of the rig to the camera exists, but not where changing the camera rig values lives. And maybe we'll have different cameras in the future and stuff like that. And then we've got materials, and materials has this materials plugin in it. The only one right now is this Uber material plugin. I'm imagining more in the future. Uber material, we actually looked at the start of stream. We can probably run that example quickly. So Uber material applies to everything in this scene and allows me to specify color reveal components on these entities. So as they move around, they can unveil the color in certain locations. That's done via storage buffers. We're doing that inefficiently currently because we're recreating that storage buffer every frame, which isn't great. At some point, I think I want to do like RGB versions of this. This is an SDF as well, so we could do outlines and things like that. We might also want to do like world effects for these spheres. So for example, if we were going to do one of these kind of positions and unveil the color for a certain position, maybe we want some kind of translucent material around that area. But yeah, anyway, this is the straightforward original implementation, not a finalized implementation. So that's what's in Uber material. So that, to get to the point there, we have to add that plugin because it is not currently added. So if we tried to use the material, we wouldn't be able to actually use it. So that adds everything that we need. And then we need not storage buffer stuff. This sets up the defaults for the storage buffer. But we probably actually wanted to find this inside of that materials plugin, now that I think about it. We probably want to just be able to fetch this as a resource because it will always be applied to every single material. But I think I'm okay with not doing that for the moment. So let's drop this stuff in here. This is buffers, extended material, Uber material. And then I guess we could just do everything. So we actually wouldn't even need to do it in here. Feels a little bit awkward to just apply it to everything. I'm thinking through this. If we react to a standard material getting created, which we can do, then I don't think we can actually know where that got created. No, we definitely can, actually. So maybe we do that. It's going to be awkward either way, I think. So maybe I just specialize it to the level right now, and then we do that later. Query for children here. How do I actually want to do this? We basically need to get all of the standard materials that are in this level. So we want to query for entities with the standard material, which would be like entity what's the wrapper for this? I don't want to say I always forget, but because of the new types, I feel like I forget more often now. Mesh material 3D. Standard material, I think is the right query for that. And this is going to be wrong for some reason. Yeah, mesh material 3D, standard material. That's what I have. See what the compiler says. Unexpected token. Oh, right, because I didn't close the... Sick. Love that. Big red blob. So mesh material 3D, entities with standard material, then trigger dot. This is this field has been renamed a couple times. I think we're looking for entity. And then that gives us children.iter ancestors. Or no, iter children. I guess descendants. Entity. For entity in, right? Because this is an entity. Then we do entities with standard material dot get entity. Let, I think this is okay equals this, else continue. I guess I don't need the entity here since we already have the entity. So let's just query for mesh material. And then do we have, yes, we have materials there. So materials.add. And this is going to be the example that I wrote over here. So we're going to need this stuff to start out with. And then we'll also need this. That's not the right place to be to write the code. Okay, there we go. Let else this. I think we probably want this outside of the loop. And then I should really turn this into a separate function so that the auto formatting works, but I just didn't, you know? Sometimes it really do be like that. Extended material, let's not set a base color because this is actually not going to be that. It's going to be mat.clone, I think, mat.0.clone. Yeah, mat.0 is the handle. We don't want the handle. We want the actual material. And then standard mats is going to be something like I really do need to actually do this in a different function at some point. This is not going to be extended. This is just going to be standard material. Standard underscore materials get that's an option, but this has to succeed because we just got the handle. So this is old mat.clone. And that's new mat. And then on this, we actually need what? Mesh material 3D. Do we need to remove that and then add it? I think we do. Because the handle is a different type. So we actually need to commands.entity, assuming that entity is the right entity, .remove mesh material 3D standard material. And is this chainable? I never remember. Yes, it is. And then we do .insert mesh material 3D new mat. And then theoretically, that's enough to apply that material to the entire level. Uber handle, yeah. I was like 50-50 on like, does Uber make sense at all for this? It's like one of those like miscellaneous like words, right? So this is the material applied to everything, right? We saw before how everything had its like not texture specifically, but the colorings on everything. There's also I guess I want to call it a bug, but like if you don't have anything defined, I think that's what happens at the center. So I feel like that's a bug, but it's a shader bug. But now everything is like, basically this is the lighting information, which I think is pretty cool. I think we could turn this into like, I don't know, like a drawing shader with like an outline and stuff. Uber just means above, and I guess in English you almost use it like meta, except the connotation is different. Uber in English, especially in the context of shaders, like an Uber shader, my understanding is that it's basically 5 shaders in one, right? Like it's an Uber shader. It contains a bunch of shaders kind of thing. That's my understanding anyway. Let's look up for Uber shader. What is an Uber shader? Frequently, when people refer to an Uber shader, they're referring to a large shader that's compiled many times with different defines for different features. Yeah. So, like, this is going to basically be a thing that is a material applied to everything and therefore has the capabilities to do everything. Yeah, one shader, the one ring shader might be a better name. The you asked something and I lost it right when the chat scrolled up. The formatting doesn't work because I'm too far nested, not because it's a closure. I'm basically like, I don't know if I can zoom out here, but I've done a horrible thing, and we are in setup, in spawn, in observe, in a closure. So we're like 4 or 5 levels of nesting deep. And I think that combined with the fact that I have a Rust format that tries to cut it off at 60 characters so that I can make it bigger for stream and whatnot, means that the formatting is like incapable of finding a solution in this case. So I think that's what it is. I think if I use the regular Rust format, then this would probably be fine. And if I moved it out, like if this function got pulled out, it would also be fine. Oh, hey, Ryan. In English, it's like super or mega. Yeah. Yeah. Like in casual usage, absolutely. I think Uber shader has a specific meaning. You suppose a meta shader would give the impression of a shader generating shader or something. Fair. There's probably theoretical compute shaders that could do something like this. That's what Hanabi does. Hanabi basically generates shaders. I don't know that it's worth showing the code, but I haven't looked at it in a while either. But yeah. A shader that shades shaders would be a meta shader, but that makes no sense. What is it? Material X? I guess render graphs is what we get into when we start talking about Material X. Anyway. I think it's really cool that we can get like all the lighting information like that. And like the textures are still there. So like the brick wall still has like it retained all the lighting information. I don't know. I just think that's like incredibly cool. I do understand that's like just how things work, but I don't know. I still think it's incredibly cool. Okay, so one of the things that I want to do here as well, now that we have that, we can also use color reveal. So if we go to box, cube 1 maybe, that's the scale cube. Crates are here. So on every crate, let's do color reveal. I'm just going to make it red for now. We're not using the color enums yet. So doing red is just as good as doing like blue or whatever, because it turns on all of the colors. Very overexposed though. Yeah, I mean it's a, how do I say this? It's a white color. So so now I should be able to color in the wall by putting a box close enough to it, which is very cool. Obviously this is like not big enough. So So let's get, where's our shader? Shader's here. Size. And I guess like the size should be like configurable per thing, like per object and whatnot. But yeah, so like now you end up getting this thing when you pick it up, you can actually start seeing colors on stuff. You get close enough to like a wall and it like shows you the colors of the wall. The way that I'm thinking about using this to potentially do something like a puzzle is if you have writing on the wall in a texture, you can make that the same value, the same lightness and whatnot. So when this shader is applied, then you actually can't read anything on that wall. But if you bring the box close enough or put it in the right spot or whatever, then the color comes back and then the like puzzle answer shows up on the wall kind of thing. Also, I just like the idea of unveiling color in general. So like if you threw this into the right spot, then theoretically it could be like, I don't know. I think it's significantly easier also to be like, oh yeah, which things should I pick up? Oh, I don't know, maybe the ones with all the circles around them. You know, like which things are interactable? Anything that like changes the rendering of the things around it is interactable. I like that as an idea too, in general. Yeah. Well, that was a weird bounce. But yeah, I really like this effect. I think I want to take it a little bit further. I think the not the exposure technically, but the shading and potentially outlining and potentially cross-hatching of the rest to make it kind of look like a drawn effect would be cool. And then you're kind of going from like sketch into fully rendered game. Let's see. Also, the reason this is so bright is because it's all like, it's funny, I just broke everything. The reason it's so bright is because it is all white for that replacement, but I can replace it with any color technically. How far do I have to go to? There we go. Let's do that. So like, I don't know. Like everything could be any color. Which is cool. You think it might still make sense? Probably very efficient compute shaders amount to building and modifying a texture as a way to keep track of state. Just don't render that texture to the screen like as it. Yeah. Yeah, one of the other things that I thought about for the implementation of this shader specifically is instead of having it on all of the objects, having it on the player and then keeping track of the player's position in the world over time. So basically writing the player's position out to a texture, which then has something operating on it to like remove that over time, so that it became like a time-based, if you were here in the last 30 seconds, then it's colored kind of vibe. The purple is ugly, but it beats the maxed out white. Yeah, I don't think the purple and whatnot is gonna be it. It's gonna be something more like this. But one of the problems with the way this whole thing is set up right now is that I can't make any real good decisions there at the moment. Because the plane is all like, how do I frame this? It's all flat, right? Like, you can definitely see how this wall, the white doesn't matter as much for the wall, right? Um, the white matters a lot for this cube because there's nothing to the cube, right? Like, it's just flat white on top, flat shade on the sides. There's nothing to that cube. But for the wall, the white is broken up by the normal map and the lighting and the ambient occlusion and everything. So it is far more reasonable to have the white on the wall and far less reasonable for like the floor like this, right? I think it's 0.8 right now. But the point I'm making is like there is no color that can make this cube look good. Right? There's no white color that can make this white cube turn into something that is like visually appealing to look at and doesn't look like it's just two blocks of color. The other thing is that this is all hopefully at some point going to turn into some kind of sketch shader. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do for that, but like the white shaded areas right now are not, how do I phrase this? There's like, the white shader is nothing right now, right? It's more like if you hit max white, it's a bit like getting a flashlight in the face scenario. Yeah, that was me last night, honestly. I was at a show last night and I'm very tall and they put the lights like just over a normal person's height. So it was like hitting me right in the face. And I definitely had vision issues sustained over that time period. But yeah, I really like this effect. I think that maybe it's time to start doing like a puzzle level design. I think we have enough mechanics to make something. So I've got to start coming up with like what a level actually looks like. What do you actually do other than just like throw, jump, right? I do really like this shader though. We also need to fix the shader at some point so that it's not recreating that buffer every... I think it's recreating that buffer for every material too, if I remember correctly. I don't... maybe it's not. I don't remember what we did. But yeah, so... puzzle-wise, we have the ability to throw. We have the ability to... run around and jump. I guess I build out a different level than this test level. Maybe add some dialogue to guide the player. Yeah, at some point. Like, we don't even have a main menu or anything, so I'm not really worried about, like, tutorializing anything yet. If you want to have the effect trail, a simple exponential smoothing type deal on the map that decides where colors ought to go to suffice. Simple exponential smoothing type deal on the map that decides where colors ought to go. Yes. I see what you're saying. Yeah. The map that doesn't currently exist. It would be the smoothing. So let's do... Oh, this is the other thing. As soon as I create a new scene, I think things break. So let's start off with making sure that I know where things are. What else do we have here? We have examples. That's important. The source is important. Art and assets don't get committed currently. I guess I'll add BRP scripts too. I didn't show those off at all. But if we run, and I move this over here because otherwise it'll be hard to see. And I don't think I've tried running the script itself yet. I just dumped it into a file. Yeah. So this, let's do maybe 2 JSON. Oh, right, because it just dumps it out. Let's do a cat of this. So this is an HTTP post that's pre-set up to do a transform query using BRP. So if we run that, that's an HTTP request against the current running game. So now we have the transform position of every entity in the game entirely, which is very cool. So if we do this and we get result, we could do like get result, select one, I think. 2 JSON. So now we have one entity coming back from BRP. So it is, I don't know, entity, whatever this is, with this transform. So this is at 0, 0, 0, scale 1. This is probably like the plane or something, or it could be the child of something, etc., etc. Just very, very fun to have that capability. I kind of want to build like dev tools that use BRP to spawn things in. Hey, Paul, gonna do parallel development with your Bevy game and have this on in the background. Sweet. What are you building? You just fixed a thing that you couldn't match a query to something. Cool. Congrats on fixing the bug. Cool. So we kind of are hard coded into this level right now is one thing that I am thinking of. I don't like that. We might want to do some of the GLTF extras stuff today, actually, now that I think about it. Because, let's see, GitHub, Bevy, GLTF. Oh, no, I need to go into the right directory first. What is this in? Is this in 3D? GLTF extras. Some advent of code, use Bevy Inspector eGUI to inspect the entities. Nice. Bevy Inspector eGUI is great. Scene root, global asset. This is the thing that's going to break for us. I think we're using scene 0 to do some of our loading. And I really don't like that in general. Check for GLTF extras. Let's see. Name, scene extras, extras, mesh extras, material extras. We probably don't have any extras in our GLTF. How would you change the character spawn's location in the level? Right now, the character spawn for this game is manually done. So the character here, where's our transform? Is 0, 10, -3. So I can just do like 20. And if we run the game again, then this should spawn the character. I don't know if 20 is off scene, but like 20 is off to the side over here. So I have Bevy Inspector eGUI as well, and we can go look at the character. And there's a transform on the character somewhere, if I can get my alphabet correct. So we're over at 20. If we wanted to, we could put that, let's see, -8 is right behind that wall. So this could be -8. And then running the game will put us behind the wall instead. Yes, absolutely. You can place an empty. Absolutely. We actually do that for the pickup. If we... You've seen the throwing mechanic already, I assume. But if we do the pickup, that is finding the location based on 2 empties. There's an empty on top of the player, and there's an empty on the bottom of the box. So if we traverse over to Blenda, and I open the library, there is like an axis empty on the bottom here. I think it's hard to see, probably. That's called hold point. This is an empty. And then in the character, which is a separate scene, there's also a hold empty right on the top. That is actually just a cube there. So if I was doing a spawn level here, I would definitely just place an empty somewhere. It might be fun if the radius of influence grows if multiple boxes are close to each other. I do like that idea. I do like that idea. We can pass any data we want here. So I can do any calculations on the CPU side and then change those values for the material. Or for the storage buffer, actually, is what I should have said. So this storage buffer right now, it just happens to be a VEC, or a VEC of VEC4s, or a VEC of array of 4 F32s. But this can actually be anything. So we can pack whatever kind of data in here that we want. The more data we pack, obviously, probably the fewer we'll actually be able to use. But I'm not really planning on having like millions of them, so we're probably fine. Yeah, Blenvy is really good too. Blenvy unfortunately doesn't have a 0.15 release. And I don't know if it's going to get one soon. So yeah, so how are we doing our level spawning? I think that's the one thing I wanted to check. Yeah, we've got scene 2 and scene 0. And I don't think there's a way to separate this. I think we have to change our loading and then do it by name via GLTF. Is Blenvy public open source now? Yes, has been for a while. Has been for a very long time, actually. Blenvy got a rebrand and a re-release in July. This is for 0.14. But all of the code is here. Even the old code before it was called Blenvy is in this repo. So Blenvy has been around. Blenvy was previously known by the amazingly branded name like Blender Bevy Components Workflow with a capital B. Oh, growing influence might be as simple as adding influence rather than taking the minimum. That would be cool. Being able to do that in the shader would be very cool. I'll think about that later. Right now I want to deal with the loading issue. So we have like level assets and player assets. But really all we have is this GLTF file. Oh, they had a child. That's what it was. Okay. I didn't know that for sure. and I didn't want to like say anything publicly, you know. Um, but that makes so much more sense. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense why they aren't currently working on this. It's been a couple months. But yeah, that's what you saw go by in Discord a ways back. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. If I don't know for sure, I don't like saying things because once it's on a stream like this, I don't know how many people are watching right now, but like, you know, 30 or 40 people watch me on stream and then people can just see that recording forever, and just saying things that are potentially not accurate is not a good idea. um, of all the things for sudden lack of support, that's definitely one of the best ones. Yeah, it's good for them. I definitely like. I would love for Blenvy to be a big, well-supported thing. I think that the Blender integration is a really cool idea. I think that it would be nice if that was maintained by more people. It's also a very tough project to onboard people into. I don't think that the how do I say this? Like, if you get a bunch of people who write Rust, right, into the Blenvy code base, a lot of the code base is actually Python, because a lot of the stuff that you actually need to care about is really handled by Bevy. They do have a custom GLTF loading and some other stuff and whatnot, but like, but yeah. And then it's like, it's really tough to test. It's really tough to test all of this Python. And there's a lot of this Python. And you have to know how to do like Blender add-ons and UI and all that kind of stuff. So I would love to see Blenvy or some version of that be a more community oriented, like multiple maintainer situation in the future. But I think that it has to be, I was talking about maintenance with my friend the other day, and I think it has to be like very intensely, not scoped down, but written in a way that is very specifically maintainable. Like it can't just be a project that gets built and added to over time. It has to be a project that is like, when we make a change, we can run a ton of tests and know if we broke anything. Because otherwise, I don't see how you would be able to like consistently make changes to a project like that over time. But yeah, very happy as well for the maintainer to just like take the time and do their kid and etc. That is absolutely 100% the priority. And right now we're getting into GLTF extras, so like this might grow into something that's a little bit of a Blender integration, right? And then maybe I have more information, maybe I can do a little bit more, maybe I can build that into something as well. But we got to start with the GLTF extras. My view on crates in general is very much influenced by a history of using packages from the JavaScript ecosystem. And it's basically like TLDR, if I don't feel like I can maintain the project, if the maintainer goes away, then using it for production is not a good idea. So things like in the JavaScript ecosystem, like choosing React would be fine because there's a teams and companies of people maintaining it. Choosing some small, I don't know, popover library. If I wasn't comfortable taking over ownership of it, I wouldn't use it for a production site. Difficulty of testing is such a killer for onboarding. Yeah. And it's a shame it seems to be an objective difficulty, as it seems to be mainly about Blender integrations. Yeah, you can run Blender headlessly. So I wonder if you end up doing like integration tests. Like we have a .blend file. It opens into a thing. We know what's in there. We run it. You get some stuff out, and then you match that against. Thank you for the DM, Ryan. I appreciate that. Perfect. Yes. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like there's a way to build it up, do some integration tests headlessly, start with a very tested thing, um, and hopefully that makes it easier for people who don't understand the whole thing to be able to actually like contribute and make changes. Because there's a whole ton of stuff in Blender that like needs to be handled, right? And then you open up the question of like, okay, well, there's this thing, right? This thing that does like Blender Bevy integration, but does that handle baking shaders? Right? Does it handle baking textures for you? Or like how do you do baking textures in a way that integrates with that library that then goes into Bevy? It becomes a whole like workflow question. So I would like to start out with figuring out how to set some of these GLTF extras, which I don't currently know how to do manually. I've heard that you can do it in the UI. We probably want this system somewhere in the application for debugging purposes, right? So let's dump this in maybe way down here at the bottom of the main file. Right, and like all of these are going to with example display. We don't need with example display. The display I don't think is going to be relevant. I guess we could do text here. But I think I'm just going to print line this. Nothing like a good print line. Just dump everything to the console. Hey, you wanted to learn Bevy. Do you know of any good beginner level project? You're thinking of doing some simple particle simulator. Do you have a history of doing particle simulation stuff? Which part of Bevy are you most interested in is the other thing. I think if you do a particle simulation and you use entities and components to do it, and you don't worry about doing like GPU stuff, and you just like everything on the CPU, you use Rust, you do updates to the positions and stuff like that, I think that's a great first project. The recommended format for GLTF extras is JSON to Serde. Oh, so I'm going to be packing JSON strings into the Blender UI is what you're telling me there? Sick. And by sick, I mean, oh no. Where are we here? Yeah, I think particles are great. Particles are wonderful. I think that will give you, if you're doing all like entities and components and the transforms and whatever, you're going to write a system. It's going to update the particles. You're going to do, maybe a query for particles that are, next to each other for like voids or something. Yeah, I think that's great. I think as long as you aren't like, as long as you're not intending to like write a compute shader that does particles and forwards that to a fragment shader, and you're learning like GPU stuff at the same time as you like pick up Bevy for the first time, then I think you'll be fine. Are all of the assets in a single GLB file? Currently, yes. They are currently all in a single GLB file. I'm gonna move forward with the single GLB file for the foreseeable future. I don't know that I have much reason to do anything else at the moment. Once we get into doing more level design or building more puzzles or something like that, we might split it up. We might have a library file and a bunch of like level files or something like that. But yeah, for now, for the moment, it's one GLB file. And that's also just happens to be the easiest way to do it. It also means that I don't need to switch between a bunch of stuff in Blender, etc. Oh, you mean to read the GLTF extras, you'll probably need Serday. Yeah. That makes sense. I want to find the UI piece. GLTF 2.0 extras. Custom properties is what they're called. Blender custom properties. Whoop, that is not what I meant to type. Properties. Data blocks, custom properties. Okay, so it's anything in here. To add a custom property, go to custom properties panel, yada yada. Custom properties panel here. Okay. So if I do a custom property, let's remove, I guess, the collider on this wall. And then maybe try to do collider that way. Where is my application? A wall. So this is the wall thing. And this is the stuff that we would have to do. And if we run this now, we should be able to run straight through that wall. Which is accurate. So, at some point, if we get this to work correctly, let's do a new custom property, I guess, on not the wall itself, but the mesh. Yeah. Oh, it's so confusing to tell what thing you're actually on. How do I select that? Yeah, I moved around very quickly. I'm trying to select the mesh, not the material, but yeah. What's the difference between exporting FBX versus GLTF? I've seen you do both. The FBX is because it works well with Substance Painter. So FBX is just an interchange format in that sense. GLTF is what Bevy will be able to pull in and use for levels and pulling information out of. I don't think Bevy has any support for FBX, but FBX is just like another interchange format. It's an older one, older than GLTF, if I remember correctly. But basically, I think Substance Painter doesn't do GLTF import. Maybe it does. Maybe I didn't need to do that. I don't know. Okay, I'm technically not selecting this from the outliner because selecting the mesh means selecting the object and then going into edit mode. Okay, so select the object and go into edit mode. So Interesting. So this is linked mesh data. So I am on that at this point, right? Okay. So we've got a collection, we've got object data properties, the object data properties, vertex groups, shape keys, UV maps, cool. Custom properties goes on. You'll figure it out. Thanks. Have a good rest of your day. In the properties panel, there's a tab for the object, orange square, and for the mesh, green triangle. And one for the material, red sphere. Yes. This is the properties panel, I'm assuming. Doesn't have a name on it. Yeah, you can add custom properties to all of those. So the question is, oh, you're saying down here. Ah, okay. So this is the adding custom properties to whatever material I have selected. This is adding custom properties to whatever mesh. Got it. And then like the object would be here and those custom properties. That's hella confusing. I get it now, but yeah. Okay, so this mesh then needs a custom property of what? Type float, integer, boolean. Do we just string it? I don't know what a data block is. Let's do integer array, boolean. I think we just string it for now. I'm going to call this collider. What is the name of this? Tri-mesh from mesh? Tri-mesh from mesh. Let's call this collider constructor? No. We're going to need more data than just this string. So data block sounds right. No, that's the outliner. The properties is below it. Am I in the wrong spot again? I'm going to leave this up for a second, just in case stream is a little bit behind. And I'm going to go, am I editing the property in the right spot? Oh, the type value is not useful there. Yeah. Cool. So testing collider generation. We'll hit OK. This is going to be a collider. Why is that 1? Oh, because it converted from a number. So in this case, because the tri-mesh from mesh is going to be automatically generated based on nothing, so there's no input, I think this is fine for the moment. So let's export the GLTF. Hope we didn't permanently break anything. And then we'll cargo run and see what we get for the GLTF extras. If I run the system at all, because this check for GLTF extras needs to actually be running. And I'm sure we could do this in a different way. We could probably do this when the GLTF loads and thus would not be... Wow. Am I just dumping out tons and tons of new lines? Let's do this. Let's do all of this, print it out, panic,
We're going to crash the program intentionally immediately after printing. In the future, for the custom properties that contain a lot of info of different types, you'll need to add a property type with a Blender add-on, or just use a string and write to the JSON directly to it. Yeah, okay. I think we get very quickly into building a Blender add-on here, which is totally fine. I think that is useful if the only... It's useful even if the only thing it does is show what it's like to build a Blender add-on to people who can then go help work on Blenvy or something like that. It's also useful if we end up with something that's useful for more people. That would also be cool. But even if it's just informative, I think that's great. So here, this is querying for entities with any of these on. Oh, this is... Okay, that's why we have so many new lines there. This is iterating over everything. So do I then... What's the best way to actually view any of this? Oh, there was one string. Okay, let's not query for all of this stuff, I guess. Let's do a different query. Maybe a different system entirely. I'll keep this around for educational purposes for myself. And instead, what I'm going to do is basically decimate it. So we know that we're looking for mesh extras right now. So let's look for only ones that actually have mesh extras. I think they are guaranteed to have a name, but let's get rid of all of this. This has to have mesh extras for it to be able to print something. This all doesn't need to be there. This doesn't need to be there. These don't need to be there. 1, 2, and 4. 2. These 2 and 4. Cool. So this should, for anything that actually has that, then print it out. So we should get far fewer random printouts. Maybe even 0 printouts because I chose the wrong thing. What do we think? Do we think these are just GLTF extras? I thought they were going to be on the mesh. Okay, let's back that out a little bit. Put all of this in here. And for any of these, if any of them are set, then print. Otherwise, don't. This is for everything, so let's not do that. Let's just do one at a time. Well, that was the wrong thing to do too. Let's do this here. You know, that's a great question. I'm so thankful to have somebody that that knows Blender better than I do in chat. Um, include custom properties. And now we end up with GLTF scene extras. Interesting. QBaker is adding random stuff in there. This is one of the things that I really wanted a better look at, actually. Because a lot of these extras get added by add-ons and they just get it stuffed in there. So, like, why is QBaker taking up space when it doesn't actually have anything to do? So the wall has a collider, and then all of these other things have QBaker on them. This has components meta. I think that's from... I think that's from an old version of Blenvy. Maybe I don't have something turned off. Yeah, so the wall has tri-mesh from mesh. And GLTF mesh extras. Collider. So this is definitely JSON. We are definitely going to have to serialize this. It doesn't have anything to do with your use case, but for it to work into Blender, it needs to be able to add properties to the object. Lots of Blender add-ons need to do that. Yes. So QBaker is something that I have installed because I was doing Blenvy stuff or Bevy Blender components workflow stuff in the past. And I needed a way to get the shaders that I had in Blender exporting something of a texture so that they could actually show up in Bevy. So that it was intentional, and I have seen that before in Blenvy. It's interesting that just having the add-on turned on starts exporting data. I feel like I almost need a clean pass for the GLTF exports because, like, I don't actually want this in there. QBaker? Yeah. The letter Q and then Baker. QBaker is like pre-rendering textures from shaders. This is QBaker or Quick Baker, I guess is the official name. Can do a bunch of different kinds of baking and whatnot. I think I was really using it very simplistically, but yeah, all of them are exported whether you want it or not is interesting because Blender Kit does things like this and it can actually break like other tools and stuff. If you want to export only what you need, you will need a Blender add-on that contains a Blender add-on for the Blender GLTF export add-on. Yeah, I think that I don't know that I care enough to scrape it out because other people could be putting stuff in there. I do generally feel like this one in particular isn't that useful, but maybe we just guarantee that we namespace everything well. And then we don't have much of a problem there either. It is nice to see that we can get those extras in. So this is mesh extras, right? So in our observer then, right? When we trigger the scene instance ready, which I think that I'm at the point where I'm just going to pull this into a new function. Let's say on level spawn. On level spawn. And then hopefully that fits. That there, this here. Save. Hey, look, we got formatting. So on level spawn, we probably want to not duplicate all of the code. We want to look for GLTF mesh extras. Right? So this will give us mesh extras for every entity that exists while we are doing this iter descendants thing. We can look for that. Let's say this is the shader swap, and this is the mesh extras handling. So we should get mesh extras.get entity, right? And this is let okay extras equals this. Actually not doing let else probably. Because if we do let else, then we have to return. Which is not what I want to do at the moment. So let's just wrap this in an if let. Then we have extras in here. Right? Debug extras. And this should be a string of that JSON. And then we can kind of get rid of this check and take the check out of the running. And when we run this and we spawn the level in, then as a result, we should see the mesh extras for anything inside of that level, which is true. So now we have this, we have the value. We need to serialize that. That probably, I probably want to define that really well somewhere. So let's do pub mod. What do we call this? I'll plug my controller back in over here so it doesn't die. Actually, there's only one extra, the JSON string, but all the custom properties will be inside this one extra's JSON. Yeah. What do we call this? We call this Blender types. And then we don't really need anything special in here. We do need serialize and deserialize. And actually, I wonder offhand, I know that I think we're going to use Saturday for now, and I want to transition into using the reflection data. I think that's what I want to do overall. So for now, we will do Saturday derive and Saturday JSON, which I don't think has any flags that we need. So Saturday deserialize, serialize, struct mesh extras. I guess. What do I call this? I need a namespace, basically. Um, I'm just gonna prefix it with B, I guess. B mesh extras, and this is going to be. What did it print out as? I already forgot. Wow, that's a huge. Oh, I bet that other things depended on Saturday too. Yep, that's got to be it. Should have used the version that we already had around, but oh well. So this is going to be. Maybe I can scroll up and see it. Collider and tri-mesh from mesh. I'm going to call this B collider. And this is going to be really silly, but I think I'm going to just define an interface here that is like somewhat like of course I have to derive it. Serialize, deserialize. Same thing for this. We're going to make these pub. And then back in main, right? That's where we're doing this. Then extras is here. Extras dot value is actually what we need here. Entity GLTF extras. Okay. So entity we're going to call this GLTF mesh extras. And this is going to be dot value, right? Yeah. So at this point, we need to do let, I don't know what to call this, data equals Saturday JSON from stir this. This will be optional result. It's a result, thus what do I want to do with this? This, I guess if it fails, I don't want to do anything, right? I guess we log out E. I guess warn, right? Because it's not really necessarily an error. I'm sure there will be things that we actually can't deserialize at some point. And then OK would be, should switch the order of these. And then we potentially have our data. So match D. And this should end up being the tri-mesh. Or we actually didn't specify what it should serialize into, did we? So result. Actually, I don't think I need to do that. I think I can do B collider. So let's run that version of it. B collider is not in scope, so we are going to fail on that point. Is it pub? It is pub. I haven't specified the type correctly. But I would like this to compile and tell me that. Also, the D down here is not. Let's make this E. Let's make. Whoa. 3 of them today. Fill match arms. We get the collider. Commands.entity. Entity. Dot insert. The bundle of rigid body static. And if I can find my brains after sneezing that hard. Collider, constructor, try mesh from mesh. So theoretically, if all of that's correct, then we should be able to run into a brick wall. Right? Nope. Unknown variant collider, expected tri-mesh from mesh, line 1. Unknown variant collider. Let me debug the actual data we're getting here. So data from string. This string is what I want to debug. And it is actually, this is the wrong type. I wrote this incorrectly, didn't I? Collider, B collider, try mesh from mesh. Did I mess up my serialization? Is my brain just not working? What is their default? Externally tagged default, which would have request on the outside. The default is to serialize to a value which is basically a variant and can be anything. Oh, you mean the Serday JSON value? Yeah, I do understand that Serday JSON has an intermediate representation. I'm looking for the, because I have an enum in here, right? This enum gets deserialized and serialized in a specific format, and I think the default for that is externally tagged enums, which means that the format that I would be looking for here would not be actually that. And I can show this actually. If I do Serday JSON to string B collider fill fields, please. B mesh extras. That's my issue. B mesh extras. B mesh extras. I don't know why I was using B collider. But we still need to do this. just because I want to see this print out. And this is not try-mesh from mesh. This is match d dot collider. So we should see the printout of the format that Serday expects if we see a failure here. So that looks good, actually. There doesn't seem to be any errors. So let's see if we run into the wall. And if we run into the wall, then that's great for us. Hell yeah. So now we have GLTF extras in Blender controlling the application of colliders. This is kind of messy, but it's just prototype work. So I'll want to clean that up. I'll probably want to clean that up and start building it into an actual plugin of some kind. Maybe do some kind of like spawn in a thing, leave a component on it, then iterate over if. Maybe provide a special observer. Yeah, number of options. But now we are doing colliders from Blender, which is great. Now there's open questions around how this gets, I think, for example, for the boxes are specified colliders currently. Yeah, so the crates do not get the tri-mesh, which means they need this definition for cuboid. Can we do that easily? Let's go into library. Let's go into crate. Let's go into the crate itself. Let's go into custom properties. And then what? Oh, this is something I have to specify every time individually. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I think we're going to get very quickly into an add-on because I don't like specifying this repeatedly like this. So string collider cuboid, I guess. But this needs to be what? A data block? Cache file node tree. I mean, text would work, but that sounds awful. So I think the types don't match up there. So let's do collider cuboid, right? And then if cuboid, then also size. Float array, float 3 defaults. Okay. Let's name this cube size, I guess. And then in here, we will have to do cuboid, but also like this, which is really disgusting. Why is that red? Can't find Vec 3. Oh, I didn't save the file. Sick. So let's get crates to be not handled like this. And let's go back down to our other code. Or I guess up to our other code, right? Hey, 101, how's it going? So then this becomes this with the extra cuboid here. And for cuboid, we're going to insert all of these, which I'm going to do only for all crates. So this is not going to be for everything, because I think the next step after this is to actually start thinking about how to define this data in a more repeatable way. But yeah. So insert this stuff, and then this has to be data dot, no, it's not data, it's d dot cube size unwrap, because it's optional. But it has to be specified here. So I'll expect cuboids in Blender have to have cube size defined. And then this is size.x, size.y, size.z. Trying to make a shader, trying to make the shader graph in Unity 3D texture visible. Are you trying to make volumetric clouds and stuff? Nice. That's fun. Okay, so this runs. We didn't export, so let's export. And then let's cargo run. And this will blow up in our faces. Yep, look at that. That's beautiful. Which thing has the collider on it? Both of them? That's wild. Well, it's got the collider, which is interesting. So that data is correct. The question is, what am I doing here? The crate is on the root of the cube. So did I put this on the wrong thing? Yes, I put this on the mesh, and it needs to actually go on the object. I wish there was a way to copy and paste custom properties. The crate does have more than one, or to be more specific, it doesn't have more than one mesh. There's only one mesh. It has multiple materials applied to that mesh, which then make it two meshes. But the thing is that I need to do this on the entity, not on the mesh. So this needs to go away, I guess. And we need to go to object, custom properties. That's crate cube. This is also going to be a different type of extra, so we'll have to do a different match. Collection, custom properties, new, string, collider, cuboid. Okay. Float, cube size 3, 111. So this is now on the crate. And the question is, what does that actually come in as in Bevy? You just wasted a day and a half figuring out that the 3D texture is only visible in URP lighting in Unity. Yeah. Yeah. They've got a couple of different pipelines, right? Okay, so here we're looking for mesh extras, but we have others to look for. The others to look for are scene, mesh material extras. It's got to be scene, right? It's either scene extras or regular extras. I think GLTF extras is root. So, you think it's in GLTF extras? Because you think scene is actually defined as the scene, and thus I did not put it on the scene as Blender thinks of it. So then it's basically the same thing as this, except in a different place. And then this doesn't happen because it's not a mesh. Let's say error, try mesh from mesh on non-mesh. Cuboid entity, this is not GLTF. Mesh extras. We want this to be GLTF extras. Let's just say G extras there. We just need another variable. And then this should work, and this should get commented out. This should technically also work. I just don't want it to accidentally apply. You guess that it depends if the Blender collection are exported as GLTF object nodes or as GLTF scenes. Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? Well, I think we have at least one of our answers. I guess we could check not extras, GLTF, import from GLB, MISC1, dump it in the same location, and then extras are all in here. So we're looking for collider, which is not here because I didn't export it. Is that the problem again? Do I have to click that every time? Did I not save? Let's make sure I exported this. Include custom properties, export. This doesn't have it anywhere, so Other than the fact that I have 15 million textures also in this. Import GLB, replace collider doesn't show up. Interesting. So the extras don't show up on collections, right? Shows up on scenes. Shows up on primitives. This is materials. This is meshes. Yeah, scenes material or scenes and meshes currently. Okay. Let's take a look at the docs. Custom properties. Types of them, min max. Python access. Only certain data supports custom properties. All data blocks, bones, impose bones, sequence strips. Interesting. GLTF add-on docs. So here. Custom properties on most objects are preserved and may be used for user-specific purposes. Most objects? Which objects are most objects? Data blocks, FBX, bendy bones. Properties. No idea. But we will be able to get into an add-on at some point here. Weird, right? Okay. Maybe not on crate then? Feels weird. Could try it on the instance. Would have to go to test level. Let's see. Blender, GLTF, collection, custom property, export. Set in object mode, not edit mode. So feels weird that we wouldn't be able to do this. I guess object is the mesh. That's not where I want to put it. The instance object would be crate one. We could put it there. You think the easiest way would be to add on the crate object, not the collection, but still in the library? Yeah, maybe. You wanted to ask about volumetric clouds. Have you worked with them? Not extensively, but there's a great video on them from Sebastian on YouTube. Where you were before in the UI? Before in the UI. You want me to put it here? On the object? On the crate cube object? I don't think that works for me. I don't think that works for me because the hold point then isn't connected to the rest of the crate cube. I want it to be on this collection. If I do it here, this does let me target that. Why does it let me target that? I don't know. Cube size 111. String, collider, cuboid, okay. Collider, cuboid, save. Back to library, remove it from here because it doesn't work. Parent the whole point to the crate cube object. Yeah, but I don't want I don't want to have to like construct things specifically because the export format doesn't work. If you know what I mean. So that works. That's per instance though. It's fun having only one of these color cubes in here. So I think I just have more exploration to do here, I think. You just use a 2048 by 2048 format texture because each layer has 256 by 256. And by this method, you can create these clouds. Yeah, if you're looking for clouds, Sebastian Log has a Coding Adventure Clouds video. I would suggest you go watch that. I did not post a link. I just showed it on stream. Also, I think I'm excluded from auto moderation. I think if I post a link, it doesn't get moderated. You know what I mean, but in your view, it's more fixing an organizational issue because of the GLTF extra stuff and not changing the format because of the GLTF extra stuff. Same thing, different point of view. So you think it should be parented to that mesh and it shouldn't be part of the collection. See, to me, it feels like, what if I have different meshes there? The hold point isn't really relevant to, like, it's a positional thing, but it's not like tied to that geometry, you know? It's just a thing in the same collection. Interesting. Yeah, the object isn't the mesh. The object contains the mesh and all other object data. It seems to me that's the right place. Yeah, in my mind, there's an object that contains everything. And in this particular circumstance, yes, I could see the argument for there's a mesh and a hold point, and the mesh should parent to the hold point because it's closely associated with that geometry in this case. I don't think that's true in all cases, and I don't think it should be true for the integration. Right? Like the general case, I don't think that should be true. At the moment, if you move the crate cube object in Blender, the hold point does not move with it. Right. Because it should move with crate, not crate cube. Right? Is my keyboard working? Hello? Because the intended usage is actually in test level, right? Like taking this and moving it around, both of them move together. That's the behavior that I want. I don't need them individually. The extra level of indirection here where it's like an instance and then it points to the crate. This crate is the object that is the container of everything else. So in any case, I think that's it for today. I think I'm going to end a little bit earlier than I usually do. I need to go eat something. But yeah, so regardless, I think the integration shouldn't specify. I think the integration should be capable of doing both. I can see the argument that you're making for this particular cube, but I don't think that that's true in the general case. A collection does not have a coordinate system. What do you mean by that? Also, you can add an empty that is apparent to both the crate cube and the hold point. Yeah. Oh, GLTF doesn't support collections. That's what you're saying. So if you want something to be there, then it has to be an empty. Interesting. I wasn't aware of that. That is weird. That would explain why the data wasn't coming in earlier. Okay, I need to look up more about how Blender translates then. How Blender translates into the GLTF format. Because if collections aren't actually things that exist, then that's important, especially as we go into building more of an add-on here. Like, we can't let people put things on collections if collections aren't going to be the things that are actually like exported, you know? Like, if we're in library here and we have these two things and then this sorry, this collection doesn't exist, then that needs to be like documented, and because that's very not intuitive. Because if we go to the export here for GLTF and we have create cube, textures, this is really hard to read through the GLTF, isn't it? But yeah, that's really awkward. How does it show up in Bevy then? I need a better understanding of how it exports from Blender into Bevy for sure, because I think we detach it if we pick it up. So I'm just going to pick it up and throw it. So we have crate. And then we have crate cube and hold point inside of crate. And I think we have it like that because it's an instance. So the instance is getting... Okay, that makes sense. Collections disappear, and because I've made it an instance in the level, then the crate instance gets a node, and that contains the things inside of that collection. I think they already are disambiguated, but I can definitely do that. All right, here's crate. So let's call this, I guess, crate collection. So we've got crate 1 and crate collection. I guess we've got another crate up here. And then we have no crate collections here. Yeah, so that makes sense. So I feel like it's interesting that the instance gets a node, but the collection doesn't. I think there was a disambiguation that was needed there. This crate and the crate in the library were named the same thing. But yeah, okay. So instances get a node and then thus can have custom properties that get translated through GLTF, but collections do not because they don't get exported. So that is like a serious UX issue, I feel like. Because I feel like Blenby allowed me to put stuff on collections and then was doing some magic to make that work. But that doesn't actually work through the GLTF. Yeah, that's going to take a little bit of like thinking, I guess. If you copy something in object mode with Alt-D, you instance the mesh on multiple objects. Then if you go into edit mode, all the instances will be edited at the same time. So I probably shouldn't do that in this level then, right? So you're saying if I did like this and Shift D and just like placed it over here and then hit Tab. That didn't do it. Alt. Alt D? Alt D. Nope. That's not Alt. Shift D is duplicate. Alt D is linked duplicate. This is Alt D. So I guess like if I did something awful like extrude this, then it would work. Yeah. And then with Shift D, if I put that over here and then tabbed into this and extruded, then it doesn't, and it's not linked. That makes sense. Yeah. Two objects with just one mesh? Wait. No. Oh, you mean instanced. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes, I see what you're saying. The instancing. Yeah, so that's interesting. That's really interesting because I feel like collections are the unit that I want to work with in Blender. But if that doesn't translate to GLTF, then you have to make a decision because in the Blender UI, you can add custom properties here. So what do you do with those custom properties at that point? Because you're not going to get those in the GLTF unless you scrape them out using a Blender add-on. And that feels like more effort than it's worth in the sense of like, if I'm going to build more of an add-on for Blender for this project, I probably don't want to go the direction of writing extra code to make Blender do things that it isn't intended to do. And I want to focus the code that's being written on making it easier to do things that are already meant to be done. Maybe this is an oversight. You mean the collection custom properties export? I don't think so. Yeah, you'd be pedantic with parenting and use collection to just organize things. I think that that's the direction that I'm going to start moving in. It feels really weird to have to do that. But at that point, that's the only way that you actually get those extra like parent entities. So parenting to empties is the way to go. Yeah. I don't think that custom properties on collections not being exported is a bug. Because if collections aren't supported at all in GLTF, then they just disappear, which means that the data on them would also disappear. So that makes sense. I don't have to like, it feels weird that the collections don't make it to GLTF, but if they're only a Blender thing and they're only for organization in Blender, then at least there's a stance, right? It would make sense to have an automatic empty for each collection, and that's something people have said in the past, but not how it works at the moment. Yeah, I could see that. And then each of them is just an automatic empty at the origin. I wonder if there's any edge cases there for like some kind of export. And I guess you could always like turn that on by default and then be able to turn it off. Actually, that's a pretty good idea, I feel like. Automatic empties for library projects. It's just an extra coordinate system. A collection could then be copied, so an entire scene full of objects could be instanced and transformed. Yeah, I'm trying to think of by putting an extra empty in everywhere. I think what you're ending up doing is putting in an extra layer of transform propagation in Bevy. So my thought in the back of my head is, does that default people to creating performance issues for themselves later? But I think if one extra transform propagation per object is enough to show up in your game, then you could just turn it off on the add-on level and not do it. And it's a better default. Because then you know that you're doing it. Like, then you know you're turning off the ability to have collection stuff. The edge case complicating the export GLTF stuff is that an object can only have one parent but be inside of a lot of collections. An object can only have one parent but be inside a lot of collections. Ah, yeah, gotcha. Okay. So maybe automatic empty is like a far more restrictive thing. And encouraging people to just set up their own empties is the better way to do it. I think that's the way that I'm going to start doing it anyway. I'm going to start with not doing automatic empty creation. And I'm just going to do empty creation manually. And then I could always, like, if that becomes too much of a hassle for me or something, then I can insert an option. Yeah. Cool. Thank you all. You are ever helpful, as always. I'm going to call the stream there, though. I need to go get some food. It's getting to be the end of the time anyway. Today we got... I feel like we got quite a bit done, actually. We got the shader working, at least in some respect, right? So this, like, material / color reveal shader. Very happy that that's working. We also got collision detection and serialization from Blender custom properties. So we're on our way to having an easier time building levels out. I think next week we probably try to focus on level building. Because now that we have a bunch of stuff working, I think it's time to make sure that this is actually going to become a game. We're about a month into what I consider roughly a 3-month project. So I think we have all of our mechanics set up. We have all of the things that we really need. The add-on probably follows us from project to project, so I'm not against putting effort into that. Yeah. So I think next week is level design. I know I put in the title here that we might have done collectibles today, but I actually don't think collectibles are that hard. They're just sensors in Blender, and you walk over them and check the collision. So if we want collectibles, we can have collectibles. I think the GLTF extra stuff was something that had to happen anyway, so I'm happy that we got to it, actually. But that's it for stream for today. So thank you all for hanging out, and I will catch you next weekend.